So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Noemi Emmerich Ford. I'm with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and we have 3 distinguished panelists here with us today. These are brilliant, diverse, extraordinary women who have not only shattered glass ceilings, but they continue to pave the way for us to have a better future. They're trailblazers, both in the public and private sector, and they're leaders in their own right, and they're models of success for all of us to follow. When we treat women as equals, and when we treat everybody as equals, honestly, we unlock the full potential of our society. As you know, women make up half of this nation's population. Their talents and perspectives, my talents, their talents, your talents, are invaluable. By embracing diversity, we access a broader talent pool, which can help us with innovation, creativity, and increased productivity. So as we delve into their remarkable journeys, we hope that you will gain some insight and you'll explore the challenges that they have faced, the lessons that they learned, and I hope that they will be aspirations that can continue to guide you as well as them. Their stories will offer guidance to us all, regardless of gender. We hope that you seek and that you find meaningful impact in the words that they share with us today. So with that, I'm going to introduce our 3 panelists. We'll start with, immediately to my left, Catherine Perez. She is the Los Angeles leader and principal with ARUP. She's a seasoned and professional in urban planning, transportation, and she oversees the alternative procurement delivery team in Los Angeles. Her background is in economic development, real estate development, transport, and urban planning policy. She is a leader, and so when I say she is a leader, she is the first Latina who has been named a principal for ARUP in all of the Americas. And so this is a new title that she's earned, so congratulations to Catherine. Our second panelist is supervisor. She doesn't even really need an introduction for those of us from California, but we will introduce her anyway. Supervisor Holly Mitchell. She currently serves on the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. She's the daughter of parents who were public servants, and she's a 3rd-generation Angelino. Mitchell leads with a deep understanding of the vital safety net that Los Angeles provides to millions of families, and she's committed to ensuring that all residents can thrive. She's honored to represent the 2 million residents of Los Angeles County's 2nd District, which includes where we are now, the city of Carson. She has numerous accolades, but I will let her tell her story when we go through the questions. And then last, but surely not least, is Barbara Romero. Barbara Romero is also a native Angelino. She was born and raised in East Los Angeles, Boyle Heights neighborhood, and she spent her career serving the city of Los Angeles residents. In June of 2021, she was appointed by Mayor Eric Garcetti as the director and general manager of the Los Angeles Sanitation District. In her first year, she successfully tackled several priorities, such as expanding the cleaning of public right-of-ways, launching LA's curbside organics collection, and leading the recovery of the Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant. Previously, before that, she was the deputy mayor of city services. Barbara has a long career in public service, and for those of us who live in Los Angeles, knowing that having her at the helm of leadership, we know that our interests are best served. So with that, could we give a round of applause for our 3 panelists? So now I'm going to ask the first question, which what I'd like to do is just go through and have each one of you address the question. So as a leader, how do you ensure that everyone is represented and has a seat at the decision-making table? So we'll start first with you, Catherine.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, sorry about that. Just thank you, sir. First of all, it's great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this great group. And I think in terms of just answering the question, diversity of leadership and diversity of perspective in the room is vital. It's critical for having representation, but it also results in a better outcome. And so one of the things that's very important to me, and we 3 have had these experiences, shared experiences of usually being the only woman of color in the room at the table. And we used to have to say, hey, we need more of diversity, fill in the blank. But now it's super obvious, and I think nowadays people see that that's an important contribution to any conversation. So for me, it's about making sure that there's, folks that absolutely should have an opportunity And it's usually because it's an oversight and it's easy to fix. And so I work really hard to make sure that as we're involving different people, we look outside the normal, like let's go to the same group of people. I always look to involve different people, diversity perspectives, identities, and also for me, a pipeline, making sure that there's people that are following me, that are behind me, that I'm pulling up, that I'm bringing forward, so that the diversity of leadership actually expands even after my role. Thank you.
So good morning and welcome to the 2nd Supervisorial District. It's great to have you all here at this great facility. You know, this notion of, it's not just my job to ensure that every table is diverse. It's everybody's responsibility, right? And Shirley Chisholm famously said many, many years ago, if they don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And so sometimes you have to expand the table to really make sure that there are diverse perspectives and diverse views. I was at a conference recently, and the panel that was speaking before I was scheduled to speak, the young man very earnestly said, I was in this room and I was the only black person at the table. And I thought about it, and I got up and I started my remarks by saying, maybe I'm just at a station in my life that's just unacceptable. And I'm no longer going to stay in a room when I walk in and I'm the only. That's not cute anymore in 2023. Not in a county as diverse as LA, or a state as diverse as California. And so, I've made the personal commitment. I walk in, I'm the only one that looks like me, I'm going to leave the space. How else will I send the strong message that having diverse representation and perspectives is what's best? Studies have shown it's what's best for business. It is what's best for government. It's what's best for every industry and sector. And so I think that all of us have to kind of make the conscious decision that when you find yourself in spaces, whether you're building the space or whether you walk into the space and you notice that lack of diversity, what are we all going to do about it to ensure that those mistakes don't continue to be made?
Yeah, that's great.
Good to be here, and there's a couple things that, for me, the way I look at it, first I see that it's my responsibility to make sure that people like me are represented, so that in order to honor my own lived experience, I have to bring in people that represent those areas. So for me, it's trusting that that it's not about your degree, it's about your experience that in your perspectives that matter. So one of the ways that I like to bring people at the table is especially right now when I have a staff of over 4,000, is creating job pathways to bring in people that live in the city of LA to work for the city of LA. So that's one of the ways that I'm doing it today, I think. But most importantly, I think it's making sure that we don't lose sight of who we're serving, and that's asking the people that live in the different communities that we serve.
So a couple of takeaways from this is, one, honor your lived experience. Second, have a pipeline. Third, bring a folding chair. And fourth, walk away if you're the only. So if you're that's a great summary of just hearing from you, how do you make sure others can be involved at the table when decisions are being made? The other is the next question is, diverse perspectives are essential for holistic decision making. Can you elaborate on the importance of diversity in leadership and how it has positively impacted your work and the communities that you serve? You want to start first, Barbara?
Sure. I think, being at the table sometimes, especially when being at the table even like 20 years ago, talking about the environment, I think that for me was honoring my experience of growing up, that my geographic boundaries were freeways. That for me, the infrastructure that was either not built or it was disconnected from my neighborhood. That helped me to define my perspective, and then also it was a different perspective than when people were talking about it. So the words that I use for, I didn't consider myself an environmentalist. I just considered myself someone that wanted to improve neighborhoods like the one that I grew up in. And so I think also the language that I use helps define, and then I think more, and just, I can go on about this issue, but I think being honest and authentic with why I was there and why I was leading really can distinguish you from other people, and knowing, and because of being honest of the resilience that I grew up with, and how that helped define my perspective. And so in those leadership opportunities, it was surprising how many people didn't have those perspectives. And so for me, it taught me that making sure that the diverse perspectives actually created and the conflict actually created a better outcome at the end. So I found that early on that was not something to be afraid to do, to just have everybody go through a meeting and everyone, that was a great meeting. It's like, no, let's have it out. Let's do this and figure out how we actually address this issue. So.
Well, and I'll just jump in because I want to build off of what Barbara's talking about the authenticity. As a woman who identifies as LGBT, one of the things I love doing is just completely destroying people's assumptions about me, because they just like, oh, she's that, and that. I'm like, no, no, and no. And what's important to me is that, as Barbara was saying, diversity of perspectives, but also how you identify, how you want to be acknowledged, how you want to belong is important to me. And as a person, my grandparents were farm workers in Coachella, not the Coachella that you all know. The real Coachella. And so I'm not very far removed from that. And I feel very connected to my community and my family, my tradition, my culture. But now I'm head of an international design engineering firm and one of the largest offices in the state. And yet, in California, actually in the U.S. But it's important for me in the private sector to also represent the voices of, because, by the way, I'm one of a handful of women of diversity heading up engineering firms in LA. And with all of the work that these two ladies are overseeing, that should change, because we have so many things, the Olympics, we have FIFA, we have transport, we have water, we have all this stuff. And thank you, Barbara, for not having the hurricane take us out, because that was bad. But I'm just saying that having you be your full self and your authentic self took me a long time to realize, and to really kind of bring my, lean in as a supervisor, lean in on this. So that's how I think about diversity and the perspective that brings to the conversation.
To not repeat what my fellow panelists have already said, leadership is an interesting word and concept. It really is. And I had the pleasure of working for two women leading one of the largest child development agencies in the country at the time, Crystal Stairs, two black women who founded the organization, who really gave me the space and opportunity to think about leadership as a discipline, and to think about how I defined what a leader is and what leadership looks like. And, for me, you walked in, you saw the picture of the mayor and all the city council people of Carson and former Congresswoman Juanita Millender McDonald, and we think, oh, those are leaders. And there are other people who are leaders who don't have titles, who may not lead major agencies, may not be elected, but they are the people we know we go to identify the problem, to bring resources to the table, and probably have the best idea about a solution. So when we talk about diversity of leadership, I think we need to think about self-identification, how you come to your leadership self, but also how we define what constitutes a leader. And so for me, when I think about the diversity, it's also identifying those people who, based on title, may not immediately come to mind, but we know they are the go-to people. Perfect example. Former Speaker of the Assembly, Willie Brown, tells fabulous, he's a storyteller extraordinaire, but he tells a story about being the only African American in his law school class at Hastings, and the struggle that he experienced, and that he learned the most powerful man on the Hastings campus was the janitor, because the janitor had keys to every office on the campus. So when Willie Brown, who may not have had a typewriter at home and needed access to a classroom after hours to get some help, the janitor was the man who had the keys to let him in to help him be successful. And so that always rings true to me as an example of who really carries the power in whatever organization that is, and that we shouldn't discriminate in terms of how we define power, how we define leadership, and who we need to have at our table, depending upon what our desired outcome is. And if it's access to resources we need, I need the janitor who has keys to every room in the building.
No, that's great. So the next question is, there are many people at base camp, right? But there are few who make it up to the mountain where the air is thin. What would you contribute to your success in reaching the top and staying there on your own terms? So you have elevated to the tops of your careers where you're at. What got you there, and how are you staying there on your own terms? So go ahead, start.
So making sure that I'm not the only one that gets there is going to be my first goal. Making sure that more of us reach the top versus those still at base camp is my perspective. There's an African proverb that I'm going to get wrong. You can go fast, go alone, go far, you go with many. And so that's just my orientation in terms of the kind of leader I fashion myself, the kind of team leader, the kind of teams I build to be able to successfully serve the parents and child care providers when I was the leader at Crystal Stairs, the 500,000 I represented as an assembly member, the million I represented as a state senator, the 2+ million I now represent as a member of the Board of Supervisors. And so me going solo is not helpful. Making sure that I have identified, supported, poured into a team of shared vision and values that can ascend with me, that we share the pitfalls and the near misses and the drops and the successes of having reached the pinnacle. From my perspective, is what my job, my responsibility really should be. And making sure that we have left a path, rope, some directions to go left, that one's kind of high, whatever, to make sure that those who are going to come behind us benefit from us having ascended before them, that we leave clear directions and support to make sure that everyone can get to the top successfully.
So I think what helped me be successful is I grew up playing sports, and and I was good at it. And I played multiple sports, and I was one of the girls that got picked before some of the boys. And so that was the first experience I had of being bullied because I was better than some of the boys. So that resilience that I built through, like downplaying how good I was sometimes. But then also I think it helped me understand how to work in a team, sometimes what it meant to lead and when to be a team player. But then most importantly, I think it helped me like fail, and move and being crushed by failing, but realizing that failure helps, you take away lessons from that. But I think in terms of staying on top is being, bringing people around me that, quite frankly, are smarter than me and have different leadership styles. But then creating a esprit de corps and a family, and then being able to, as a leader, be able to make decisions and support the team through that, and say, hey, we need to get from A to B. How that looks like, you guys can help me figure that out, and being okay with it might look different than what I might have taken the path. And I work with a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists, but I also work, I'm in charge of the residential trash collection. So I work with a lot of drivers and trusting all them for giving me the recommendations that I should consider. And then, making those executive decisions and living with them, whether they're good or, owning them. And sometimes realizing, I think the biggest thing, as a woman, that I think it's okay to be vulnerable, to be, when people ask me, how do you do this big job? I'm like, depending on the hour. And ask me, I could be here going, I got this, I'm in. But then something happens and I don't. And asking for that support, because it could be very lonely. So having a support system. But I think as a leader is redefining that, for me, I have learned through the years that being vulnerable and owning that, where I am, with men or women. And I work with some of the toughest people in the city. We do a lot of the encampment cleanups on the street, and we have some really tough souls that do hard work day in and day out, and they provide strength and allowing people to as it's my job to bring them up, also allowing them to support me.
So, Naomi, you asked, how do you stay on top? I'm not at the top yet. I still have a bunch of things I got to do. And there's global opportunities. There's other things that I feel like I need to do. So, LA is critical, important. We got a lot of things that are happening. But I do know that there's a global importance that is, for me, a next journey. But the way that I think about that question is twofold. One is that I pay it forward. I've been an adjunct associate professor at USC in the Graduate School of Urban Planning and Real Estate for 16 years, and I've been teaching students for many, many years. And I work. You don't do it for the money. Let me just be honest about it. You do not. But what I do it for is because when I was in grad school at UCLA, I never had a person like me in front of the classroom. And I never had somebody that I could confide in and talk to about the choices and things I wanted to do. So I'm paying it forward by every year contributing my time and really shepherding these students and letting them kind of, poke and probe and challenge me. And I tell them, challenge me, because that's how we learn together. And that's how they find their voice. So one is paying it forward, and the second is to accept the help that is offered to you. And as a very, very independent woman, I'm like, I got this, I can do this. And sometimes, like Barbara says, I don't, it's very hard for me to accept help, but I do. And it comes from places that I'm not always sure what to think about it. But one man who just passed away, Wayne Rakovich, he helped me at it. He was a person that, this older white guy from the West Side, he and I could not be more different in terms of lots of things. But he supported me at times when I needed support and didn't know what that looked like. And he valued me. And he never questioned my credentials or anything. He just said, you are amazing, and we're gonna, and there's so many roles, and I think back, just because he passed away, and I think they had an obituary today, in the LA Times, about him. But he was responsible for so much of the historic renovations in downtown LA. Historic projects that nobody would touch, and they were hard. And he did them because he thought that there was value in like that treasure, right, we have in our cities. So when he came and he said, I want to help you, I didn't know really how to take that, but I learned, and on his shoulders and on many other shoulders. That's the only reason why we get here, is because other people are there. Like the supervisor said, we open the door and we help people through. But we all got here because we had the support of people who are not exactly who you think would offer you support, but assist us in the journey.
Can I just piggyback on that right quick?
Sure.
I completely agree with you, without question. And then there's another element. My team and I read books together. When I first got elected to the board, we all read Grandmother's Hands, powerful book that talks about that it's everyone's job to, that white supremacy impacts everyone, whether you're a person of color or not. The most recent book we read by a brilliant author, activist, Mia Birdsong, and the title is, okay, even my younger staff, I'm almost 60, so I can remember less and less. How we show up. Thank you. That's the other key, higher, younger, smarter than you people, right. Mia Birdsong, How We Show Up. And our goal about reading it together as a team is she talks about how we show up in our workspace, as a reflection of how we then deliver the services that we do and thinking differently about the role of government. Wonderful book. We then brought her, the author from the Bay Area, to come and do a session with my team as a part of our strategic planning experience this year. And she talked about feeling like you belong. Like, this is where I'm supposed to be. And this notion of the power of gravity. And at any moment when you think that, you're suffering from that imposter syndrome kind of situation, if you acknowledge that gravity is what's holding all of us on the planet. So it's the sheer force of gravity that justifies you being right where you are. I thought that was so powerful, that if anyone looks at me and suggests, I don't know how you got into this position of power. I'm like, well, gravity values me. Gravity is holding me right here in this seat on the Board of Supervisors. And the other piece she offered, which was even more powerful, was, and gravity is also holding that other person that you may be questioning. How did they get here? How are they in that position of authority? Gravity is holding them in that space too. So while we are looking for people to help us, even when we don't know we need it, or how help shows up, we also have to remember that we're supposed to be here in this moment in time. And I would just consistently remind myself, and will share with you all, that I also have a responsibility to not waste the space I'm in. That since I'm in it, that I have this unique opportunity to have a bully pulpit and a platform, I am supposed to use it to its fullest potential, from my perspective, to affect change for the residents of LA County. So we can't waste the space we're in. You got to lean in and take full advantage of the opportunities.
Yep, those are great responses. And some of the key takeaways from that is, one, as a leader, regardless of whether you've made it to the mountaintop where the air is thin or the air is even thinner, if you ascend to go higher, is vulnerability. And behind the vulnerability is having people around you who are not only smart, but who are smarter than you. I love the breadcrumbs and directions. So when you're making your way to the top, in order to bring people behind you, leave them the directions and the breadcrumbs so that they can come in behind you, and so that table will always stay filled and be diverse. And then acknowledging those who have the access, those who are the real decision makers, those who are really making things happen, like the janitor, right, who will help you get to that ascension of success. And then, of course, we've all heard the term pay it forward, right? So continue to pay it forward, but in that paying it forward, also accepting the help. So that accepting the help leads me to my next question, which your path to success has often involved, which you've described a little bit, mentorship and support. Can you tell me about someone who's played a significant role in your journey and how their guidance influenced your journey to leadership? And so which direction, based on this person, you've kind of shared a little bit about the gentleman. So if there's someone else that you could think of who's helped you reach that approach to leadership.
I'll just say that, obviously Wayne was amazing. And for me, again, growing up the way I grew up and with the kind of the perspective I did, he helped me realize that, and we've kind of gone through these whole experiences, and it makes you up of who you are and how you come forward. And he, for the first time, made me feel like there was a, I had a purpose in a way that was very hard. Even though I had degrees and everything, it doesn't really matter. There's still this kind of insecurity. And once I kind of got through that, I always have mentors, and by the way, no matter where you are in your journey of life, you need mentors, personal and professional, all day long. And so I have a bunch of mentors that have walked many complicated lives, and they have shared with me. I get to kind of like throw my stuff out in front of them, and they just say, "Oh, is that as bad as it is? Come, let me help you." And they help me give perspective, because sometimes when you're in it and it feels so lonely and so hard and dark, there's somebody that kind of gives you that ray of light to just help you get through to the next day, to the next challenge. And so for me, as Barbara was saying, I've had disappointments too, but for me, the biggest issue is regret. I will never, ever live with regret anymore, because life is too short. You never waste your time. That's all we have. And when our time is no longer here on earth, then it's important to know that you made a difference. And for me, that difference is impact and positive impact on other people's lives. And so whatever form and shape that takes, I can't even count how many. It just came clear to me because we lost Wayne recently, but there's so many, and they're younger and older and all kinds of things. But I think it's important to recognize that we all need that in our lives to help us move forward.
Holistically, I have to say that one of the things that the reason I do the work that I do is because government programs worked for me. And so I feel that gratitude, that it's my part of who I am that defines me, we're in this time of cynicism, and I still feel the openness and the responsibility to show people that government can work for people, and it does create opportunities and generational wealth. And so for me, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a counselor, because those were people that helped shape who I am today. But as an adult, I had a couple, one woman in my first professional job, I was getting all these other jobs. I was working at a nonprofit. I was working at LA Conservation Corps. And she would say, and then she said, I think you need to take some leadership classes, because you need to figure out, what do you want to do in 5 and 10 years? And so she helped me think about beyond the present. And so she helped define where I am, 25 years later, 30 years later, actually. And I'm saying 20, but it's really 30. And then Bruce Saito, who was the executive director of the LA Conservation Corps, and he's about to retire from the California Conservation Corps. he was every time after I worked for him, because I thought I was going to be a nonprofit. I didn't want to be in government. I wanted to be I wanted to be a community organizer when I was, that was the first job. And every time I got a job offer, he's the one that I called and said, "What do you think?" And he was the best because he always turned it back. He's this Japanese man who would always he would throw the questions back at me. And I didn't realize that he was helping me make my own decisions. He wasn't telling me. But every time I walked out of there, I thought, oh, he just told me what to do. And it wasn't until later in life that I'm like, oh. So every major job that I've had, he helped me work through the process. And so those are, a couple of the people. And I just been pretty blessed to have, and I seek mentorship because I value it. And so I've been blessed to have people around to support me.
I ran across this quote the other day, and it just tickled me. It says, "I want to be 14 again and ruin my life differently. I have new ideas." Don't you love that? Like the two of you, I've had mentors my whole life. Starting with my parents, my mother was a badass, type A personality, brilliant, a woman ahead of her time, that was probably born too early, but had an amazing life and career at the time she was born and was very good. I had the privilege of her mentor became my mentor. Her mentor, her first boss, out of USC School of Social Work, hired her at LA County Department of Public Social Services, then became my godmother and became my mentor. So for one woman who died in her late 90s to be able to kind of support and nurture two women along our professional trajectories is really kind of a unique experience. And so my godmother's famous advice, first to my mother and then to me many years later, was, "Holly, most people are average." Like, oh, okay, so stop getting frustrated because this person didn't follow the bouncing ball. Okay, most people are average. Think about that. It'll help you one day, and you'll thank me later. I think not only in terms of the mentors who are the wind beneath our wings and help us, it's also those people who say things to you that make you mad enough to rise above. So we have those people to thank in an interesting kind of way, too. I had a trainer. I was a Coral Foundation fellow here in Los Angeles, and my trainer told me she thought I was intellectually lazy. I think I was 22. And after having that initial thought, I thought, okay, we'll see. And I realized years later what she saw, it wasn't that I was intellectually lazy, it's that I was 22, that I felt I didn't belong. Coral, highly competitive, I'd gotten in the room, didn't fully appreciate my own skills and talents that I brought to the interview, which is why they selected me. And so I kind of sat back and I was quiet maybe the first half of the year. I was observing, kids from Ivy League schools. There were some mid-career people. There are only 12 per class. So I was really kind of sitting back because I was trying to figure it all out until I got my groove. And so by the end of the year, I'm sure she didn't think I was intellectually lazy. But that also helped me understand the gravity lesson from Mia Birdsong, that I am here for a reason, and to never question or second guess that. So as we talk about mentors and people who breathe into us love and guidance and support and direction, there are also those who, whether intentional or not, give us that pebble that I think it's important for us to think about and dissect. Are they right? Are they wrong? And what am I going to choose to do with that pebble, to make myself stronger?
No, that's great. And so I like to say sometimes your mentor, another word for them is also your therapist. So get both. So I'm going to take, there's several questions that are on the app, so these are audience questions, and then if you want to ask a question, you're also welcome to come to the mic. So the first question we have on the app is, how are you leveraging your leadership as women visionaries to support queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, and women of color? And so I know you've answered some of that as you've gone along.
So as I was saying, I teach, and so I have a lot of mentees, and I reach out to, and I'm available always to people who are trying to find their way. And in today's world where it's very confusing and can be difficult and hard, I identify with all kinds of, whatever, the pronouns are important, and people kind of dismiss that. And these are things that I have begun to appreciate, how people can, how little messages about things that, as you believe your value system, they come across. And so whenever I talk to groups, I always use he, she, they, because I want everybody to know all of you are welcome in this conversation. All of you are invited to participate. And so, because somebody will feel othered, right? And so to me, making sure, as a supervisor was saying, that there's a belonging, that there's a seat for you, and there's a voice that you have that's important for the conversation. And to me, we're not moving fast enough on the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. I just came back from a trip in Europe where my international colleague in leadership was there, and I was saying to the supervisor earlier, it's amazing how many Caucasian men they could fit it in a room, but they did. And I was like, okay, we're on that journey of diversifying this firm, but we're going too slow. And so even though United States Supreme Court kind of turned down affirmative action, so what? We are still committed. We believe it's important. We are doubling down on these things. But it's important that people are at the table to make sure that that momentum doesn't slow down. And that's how I feel wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, that I am making sure that that voice is very clear. So for the LGBTQIA plus community, there is a very important contribution from folks to participate. And we need to know that that voice right now feels very threatened and under attack. And so to feel safe and know that their comments are valued is critical to me. So I make sure that when I was saying the diversity of the table, I mean everybody at the table, because they all bring unique perspectives. But it's important that that there's a person with authority and role to be able to say that. And we can. And so you can too. And we all have that role, as the supervisor was saying. We all have that role to make sure that that happens.
So for me, I think it's a couple ways. Obviously, I have the luxury and the responsibility to be able to hire people. So my executive team, what it looks like is important, and then having different avenues to connect with staff. Just like a newsletter just for us, like, celebrating people's accomplishments, people's milestones is really important. And then having opportunities to connect with them on in their personal lives. So I'm one that loves, I'm like, invite me to things. And now I'm getting invited to things that it's really great, because it's really a time to, and for me, and I talk to this a lot, is we a lot of times spend more time with the people we work with than the people we that are family. So this is our, our families, a lot of times. So how do we create opportunities to be a better family? So I create, like Dodger Lions, a bunch of things with them too, because it's a big organization. I feel that being accessible is a way to feel, to create a safe space for people to connect with me, because I represent, different aspects. Like, we've never seen someone who lives in LA who has that position, or someone who's a woman, and or the first time I'm meeting some of them because we've been on Zoom or Google, and then they meet me and they're like, "You're a little shorter than you appear on Zoom," and I'm like, I hope that's I'm like, is that a left-handed compliment? But it's having those moments with people that we are just people too, and those are some of the ways that I tried to do it in this role.
Black trans women are under attack. Their safety is challenged, employment is problematic, housing, and I know that because Black trans women told me. They were willing to share their lived experience with me. And I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to be open to hear and learn from people who walk a different path than we do. And so I think that's where I begin. And from that space, it's not only about making sure that I'm including the LGBTQI plus community and the trans community and the non-binary community into spaces to have policy discussions, but that I'm also educated so when they are not in the room, I can rep for you. I think it gets a little dicey when people attempt to speak on behalf of other people, but I need you to. I'm not going to be in every room. And so if you can hear from me the issues around the Black maternal morbidity rates in this county, that Black women are dying at higher rates than any other ethnic group in an effort just to deliver a healthy baby. If we can learn the issues impacting other communities, we can stand in that space, not to represent anybody else, but to stand in that space and be a true, authentic ally. So I think I have a dual role to play, to be open, to hear, to learn, to be an ally all times, and to create opportunities for inclusion in meaningful and not patronizing ceremonial ways. And so to bring people into space, to include diverse perspectives on policy issues that aren't specific to how you identify. And so to bring diverse groups in to talk about environmental justice and health and housing policy, to recognize that everyone may have a different perspective in terms of how it impacts how you self-identify.
No, that's great. Another question, I'm going to combine two questions into one. It's do you feel like you carry a heavier burden in your leadership role because you have a greater appreciation for marginalized or underserved communities and groups? And do you ever feel like members of the majority are not getting it? How do you address those situations, and how do you address environmental justice? It's a lot. So let's lean in on how do you share the appreciation of knowing in your role that you have a greater appreciation for this? How do you share that with others when they're not getting it? And then how would you address environmental justice in the work that you do?
Okay, someone step up and answer the question, because I was texting the 23-year-old who is at the vet and doesn't have the money to pay the vet.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, so answer while I handle my personal life right quick.
I was just going to say, as a parent of 3 kids, 2 that are queer and one that identifies as non-binary, I'm like, what you just said about Black women, Black trans is so meaningful to me, because this is a very kind of uncertain time in California. We're kind of in a different space and place, and you should just know that. We're a very special place in California, because there are protections that we're given, that we've earned, and we have. But in terms of what you were saying about if in the room people aren't recognizing the value of a diverse perspective, I got to say, I feel like we've kind of passed a certain kind of, in the arc of social justice, environmental justice, we've kind of passed I remember Trust for Public Land, Barbara, you may remember this, in like 1995 or 6, did a fascinating seminal report on, it was so insulting, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But Trust for Public Land, I love them. They paid for this report, this study that said in Los Angeles County, they found out that, guess what? Mexicans care about the environment. It was like, what in the world are you talking about? Anyway, they had to kind of do their own verification, but they had to say, guess what? Mexicans care about, because they have kids. Yeah, we have a lot of them. And then it was also that they like to have clean parks and safe schools and safe communities. I'm like, this is a no kidding, you paid for that report? But what it also told me is that some people need to just better understand like what are, what people are facing. And so to me, we have and again, California is a little bit of a unique place because we've done all this stuff. We understand the importance of what social justice looks like, what environmental justice looks like. And in fact, out here we've had all these kind of contamination and issues, and certainly this organization has been at the forefront of some of the hardest efforts and most important efforts. But I would just say that we are in a place where maybe I should backtrack and say, let's not take it for granted. With all that said, maybe I should say we shouldn't take it for granted because injustices still occur. And things are still happening. And so as long as there is injustice happening somewhere, that means we don't have justice for all. Martin Luther King. That's right. So I would just say that to me, and when you started your question, Naomi, it just kind of sparked my which is, because usually we're alone. Usually we're very, usually our voice is very, there's not a lot in the room like us. And we have lived these lives. The three of us have had to walk in these rooms for many, many years. And it's intolerable. I've learned to find a way to kind of have the conversation without, I used to be kind of a flamethrower, but now I'm realizing, okay, how do I do this in an effective way so that people see what I'm saying shouldn't be dismissed, but should be self-evident. And to me, that's what I try and do, because to me, winning them over is more important to me, because then I can rely on them later. I don't have to say, hey, by the way, we should be concerned about the communities and consult with the neighborhoods we're doing this work in, because they will live with this. So that, and by the way, the class I've taught for 16 years at USC is called Public Participation in Planning, Land Use, and Real Estate. And the arc of that course in the last 16 years has completely shifted, that we are now kind of post-pandemic, if I can say that, very different in terms of sophistication in language and access and, the blind and hear all this stuff. We're much better, but we still have so much more work to do. So for me, it's about using all the tools, using all the ability, the things that we have at our hand to be able to allow people to participate. Sorry that was long, but sorry.
You said you had two more questions. You want to hit the last two? So
Sure. Yes. So.
I'm not trying to run the
No. You look like you're going to answer. You want to?
Yeah,
okay, real
I'll
quick.
answer well. So I think for me, for a long time, it would be the public debate discussion to try to validate that, validate that I knew what I was talking about. But I realized that would just then put you in a corner. That, okay, you know what the issue is going to be. I was everything, as a planning commissioner, I'm like, okay, I can't raise the same issue every time. So, being more strategic of how I raise the issue and when you raise the issue is really important. But then more importantly now is what I think the best way that I manage that is, everybody just says the words. Like, I believe in that. And now the way I deal and live with it and try to manage it is actually doing it. Including, like, for an example, like in the city of LA, we have a targeted local hire program. And it hadn't been working. That we had, over 16, like thousands of people on a list. And the different departments didn't want to hire the people. when I was in the mayor's office, I'm like, please hire them. And now I have that luxury that I can hire those people. And I'm like, I'm just going to start hiring people because staff wasn't comfortable because the targeted local hire, population, are they going to show up to work?
Yeah.
It was just like those stereotypes. So for me, it was like, not only let's hire the people so you can see how appreciative, like they're going to work hard, they want the job, but then also creating other programs like job pathway programs, make it easier for people to come into the city system, and then showing them how valuable of an asset they are. So for me, that's like an example of like just showing that not telling people my position on those issues.
Don't we have like tens of thousands of openings in the city? I mean,
Yeah.
We have tens of thousands. We should be pulling everybody in, right?
Mhm.
And we know, by the way, we're standing in front of lunch. We were told that, so.
Yes. So I'm going to combine two questions into one. And since Supervisor Mitchell, you were taking over the panel, I'm going to take it back. And I'm going to give the question to you. So,
Don't give your power away.
yes, that's right. She told me earlier, never give my power away, so I'm taking that back. You hit on this earlier because I think you would, the question is related to overcoming the imposter syndrome feeling. And at first, the question is, at first, one may feel like they don't belong. How did you overcome that feeling and remind yourself that you do belong? And also within that, how do you prevent getting burnt out? And if you do get burnt out, how do you bounce back? So both of those, if you could address those.
The burnout, yes.
The burnout is real. We all get tired. I mean, it's just real. And, I resent this notion, particularly for, I think, women are told this. I think, the men in the room can correct me if I'm off, this notion of balance. And when I think balance, I think the scales. And the whole notion of balance is to keep the scales even. And that's not adulting. That's not real life. Those of you who are old enough to remember the Carol Burnett show and the guy that would spin the plates. You remember that? He'd spin the plates. And just when he'd get to the end and the plate on this would start to rock, he would magically get all the way back and hit that, and the plates would all stay in the air. Or to juggling. The goal is not to drop a ball. Now, you may have to make a diving leap to get that ball from dropping. And so I think, giving yourself grace will help with the burnout, because what burns me out is when I'm trying to do it all. And giving myself grace that I'm not going to do it all perfectly. And then making sure other people are checked too. That when it's 3 or 4 days in a row and my calendar is so full, I'm not even sure when I'm supposed to eat. And so then telling my team, I'm not sure when you think I'm supposed to eat, but let me help you. Today, it might be at my desk, but this 30 minutes is about to get clear. I mean, so I think the way to deal with burnout is to do all you can proactively to prevent it. And it's different for all of us, whether it's that walk, you have to get outside and breathe. We learned as a team some Tai Chi moves recently. We start I call my all-staff meetings my all-star meetings because they're my all-stars. We start all-star with breathing exercises. We do a dance break in the middle of our 2-hour all-star meeting. We are coming up with creative ways because we work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, to acknowledge that we need breaks, give ourselves grace, to breathe, to move our bodies, to have lunch, even if it's at my desk, not on the phone, not on a Zoom call. I think the best way to combat burnout is to be thoughtful about what you do to prevent it.
Yep. So I'm going to clear your calendar. We have an hour for lunch.
Good.
So the panel, so thank you for those who presented their questions. And so if we could give a round of applause to 3 fabulous panelists. So thank you all for joining us. I think we're going to head into lunch.